The wind howled through the trees, a sharp, biting breeze that seemed to carry whispers of forgotten tales. It was the kind of night that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, the kind of night that made you feel as though you weren't truly alone. The fog rolled in thick, wrapping the small town in a blanket of mystery, and the moon, pale and distant, barely offered any light. In the heart of that fog, a group of friends sat huddled around an old, tattered map, their faces illuminated by the flickering flame of a single lantern. None of them knew it yet, but they were about to awaken something that had been slumbering for centuries, something that was never meant to be disturbed. Main character Lena was not the type to believe in stories of ancient creatures or forgotten legends. She was practical, methodical, and far too intelligent to indulge in fantasies. As the youngest in the group, she often felt as though she had to prove herself, to show the others that she was more than just the quiet one with her nose in a book. But tonight, Lena's usual confidence was tempered by an unfamiliar sense of unease. The map they were following was old, its edges frayed and stained with time. The symbols on it were strange, cryptic, and Lena's fingers trembled ever so slightly as they traced over the worn lines. Her friends, Jason, Amanda, and Alex, were equally intrigued by the map, but it was clear that Lena had become the leader of the group. Jason, always the skeptic, had started out by dismissing the map as a prank, but even he couldn't deny that something felt different tonight. Amanda, ever the optimist, was thrilled by the adventure, practically bouncing on her heels in excitement, and Alex, who was more of a follower than a leader, had stayed quiet, his face a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. But it was Lena's voice that broke the silence now, her words heavy with uncertainty. "Do you think we're making a mistake? We've been out here for hours, and I'm not so sure we're headed in the right direction." Her voice was soft, yet sharp with apprehension. Jason rolled his eyes, brushing off her concerns. "We're fine. You've read the map. It's just up ahead. Come on, it's an adventure. We'll find whatever treasure or whatever it is we're supposed to find, and then we'll head home. Simple." His tone was casual, but even he couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. Amanda chimed in, her excitement bubbling over. "It's going to be amazing, Lena. Think of the story we'll have to tell when we get back. I mean, who else will have done this? We're like modern-day explorers." But Lena wasn't convinced. Something in the air tonight, something about the fog, made her feel like they were being led into something they couldn't control. Yet she stayed silent, unwilling to spoil the mood. She would follow them, if only for the sake of the adventure. It had been her idea to go to the old ruins in the first place, after all. But as they neared the clearing marked on the map, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing into a place where they didn't belong. Setting. The town they called home had always been small, always nestled on the edge of a dense forest that few ever dared to explore. For generations, the locals had whispered of strange happenings in the woods, of things that crept through the shadows and ancient stories about a creature said to dwell deep within the earth, waiting. The ruins that the group sought were forgotten by most, hidden beneath layers of time and overgrowth. The sun had long since set, leaving the forest dark and ominous. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. The moon, barely visible behind the fog, cast eerie shadows across the path, distorting the landscape and making it seem as though the very ground was shifting beneath their feet. Despite the unease in the air, the friends pressed on, determined to reach their goal. Lena's mind raced, filled with questions and doubts. What had drawn them here? Why had they chosen this place? She could feel the weight of the legends on her shoulders, as if the very land itself were watching them. The ruins lay ahead, just as the map had promised. But they didn't look like anything Lena had imagined. The stones were cracked and worn, covered in moss and vines, half swallowed by the earth. The air around them was still, eerily quiet, as if even the wind had abandoned the place. Jason stepped forward, his voice eager. "Here it is, just like the map said." He grinned, clearly proud of himself for not giving in to Lena's doubts. He reached out to touch one of the stones, but before his fingers made contact, a strange shiver passed through the air. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, as if something below had stirred. Lena froze. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Amanda and Alex turned to her, their expressions skeptical. "It's nothing," Amanda said dismissively. "It's just the wind or the ground settling. Let's go inside and see what's really waiting." But Lena couldn't shake the sensation that something was wrong. The very air seemed charged, as though a presence was lingering just beyond their sight, watching them, waiting for them to make the wrong move. Conflict. As the group ventured deeper into the ruins, Lena's discomfort grew. The stones that once seemed like mere relics now appeared to pulse with an ancient energy, as if the ruins were alive. Jason, still oblivious, laughed off her concerns, insisting that they were just relics of a forgotten past. But Lena couldn't help but notice the way the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, how the stone carvings along the walls seemed to whisper in a language she couldn't understand. And then they found it. A small, intricately carved stone pedestal sat in the centre of the ruins, its surface slick with moisture. On it was a stone tablet, so ancient that it seemed as though it might crumble to dust at any moment. Jason's eyes lit up as he reached for it, but Lena's heart skipped a beat. "Wait!" she cried, her voice louder than she intended. "Don't touch it!" But it was too late. Jason's fingers brushed the surface of the tablet, and in that instant, a deafening roar echoed from deep within the earth. The ground shook violently, and the ancient creature, once dormant, once forgotten, stirred from its centuries-long slumber. The friends had awakened something far older than they could have imagined, and there was no turning back. The fog closed in around them, the air thick with the smell of decay and something far worse. And as the shadows moved, Lena understood. They had disturbed the ancient forces that had been waiting for this moment. They had no idea what they had unleashed. The ground beneath their feet shuddered again, this time more violently than before, and a chilling sound split the air. It wasn't a roar like before, but a deep, reverberating growl, distant yet undeniable, like the earth itself was waking up. Lena's heart raced as she looked around, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Jason, still standing beside the pedestal, didn't seem to notice the growing sense of danger. He wiped his hands on his pants, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Did you hear that? Probably just an animal or something," he said, his voice shaky but trying to sound confident. But Lena wasn't fooled. She could feel it. The air had thickened, and the ground beneath them was trembling as if something enormous was stirring beneath the earth's surface, waiting to break free. "This is bad," she whispered, almost to herself. Amanda, eager to keep the excitement alive, bounced on her heels and laughed nervously. "It's just the wind, Lena! Come on! Don't be such a buzzkill!" But even Amanda's voice faltered as she looked around, her eyes wide, the flickering lantern casting long, eerie shadows across her face. I don't think it's just the wind," Lena said, her voice shaking. She took a step back almost instinctively as a dark shadow passed across the ruins. "Lena, come on!" Jason snapped, his tone sharp now. "You're overreacting. Look, we're here. We found it. This is going to be amazing." He reached for the tablet again, but this time Lena's voice cut through the tension. "Jason, stop!" she shouted, her voice rising with panic. She stepped forward, grabbing his arm before he could touch the tablet again. "I don't think you understand. We shouldn't be here. This place, it feels wrong." Jason yanked his arm free, his face twisted in frustration. "This is insane, Lena. Stop acting like a kid. We've come all this way. Are you really going to bail now?" Lena swallowed hard, her eyes scanning the darkened ruins. The sounds of distant growls had turned into an oppressive hum, reverberating through the air like the beat of an ancient heart. She was starting to feel it. Something was watching them. The ground trembled again, but this time it was accompanied by a deep rumble that seemed to come from the very earth below them. "Jason, please," Lena said, her voice pleading. "Something is here. I don't know what it is, but it's not safe." Before Jason could respond, the rumbling grew louder and the shadows around them shifted. The ground cracked beneath their feet, and suddenly a massive force erupted from the earth, something that was too powerful, too ancient to comprehend. Lena barely had time to react before a colossal figure emerged from the darkness, its form outlined by the fading light. It was massive, towering over them, a creature from legend, its body covered in scales that shimmered in the lantern's light. its eyes glowing with an eerie, malevolent light, fixed on them, and a deep growl filled the air. Jason froze. "What the hell is that?" Lena's heart pounded in her chest. The ancient creature was real, more real than she could have imagined. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. This wasn't some myth, some tale spun by the town's elders. This was real, and they had just awakened it. "Run!" Lena screamed, grabbing Amanda's arm and pulling her back. The others stood frozen in shock, but Lena knew there was no time to waste. They needed to get out, now. But it was too late. The creature moved with terrifying speed, its massive claws digging into the earth as it closed in on them. Its growl deepened, vibrating the air around them, and the very ground seemed to tremble with its presence. Jason finally snapped out of his daze, but by then it was clear that their escape would be no easy feat. "What the hell is happening?" he shouted, his voice hoarse with panic. "Why is this happening? Move!" Lena screamed, shoving Amanda and Alex ahead of her, her legs trembling beneath her as the creature roared, the sound deafening. The fog around them thickened, swirling in unnatural patterns as though it was part of the creature's will. The path they had taken to the ruins was now lost to the thick mist that consumed everything around them. The world had become a blur of shadows and terror. Lena looked over her shoulder as they ran. The creature was behind them, closer now, its eyes fixed on them like a predator watching its prey. She couldn't believe this was real, couldn't believe they had been foolish enough to disturb something so ancient, so powerful. The legends had been clear. No one was to enter these ruins, and now they were paying the price. "Jason, move!" Lena shouted again, but Jason was lagging behind, his legs seemingly frozen in place. "Jason!" Amanda screamed, her voice breaking with fear. "Come on, we have to go!" Jason turned toward them, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. "It's too late," he whispered. "It's not going to let us go." Lena's breath caught in her throat as she realized the terrible truth. Jason was right. The creature wasn't just hunting them, it was toying with them. The ground rumbled again, this time with a terrifying force. The ruins began to collapse, the stones shifting and falling as the creature's massive form pushed forward. The air grew heavier, the fog suffocating, and it seemed as though the earth itself was closing in on them. "Go!" Lena shouted, pushing Jason forward. "We need to get out of here." But as they turned to run, a deafening roar split the air. The creature's claws slashed through the mist, and for a moment, Lena felt the weight of its gaze on her. It wasn't just angry, it was waiting. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. They had been wrong all along. This wasn't an accident. The creature had been waiting for them. The legends hadn't been warnings, they had been a prophecy. As the group ran, the world around them seemed to shrink, closing in with every step they took. The fog thickened, and the creature's growls echoed in their ears. It was too fast, too powerful. They would never outrun it. Then, just as Lena's legs began to give way beneath her, she heard something. Something that didn't belong. A distant sound, a scream, but not from her group. Someone else was here. The fog seemed to press down on them like a living thing, thick and suffocating, its damp fingers curling around their throats as they fled. The creature's growls reverberated through the ground beneath their feet, the sound rippling through the air like an ancient warning. But the group had no time to ponder the implications of what they had awakened. They were running, heartbeats frantic in their chests, their breaths ragged in the cold air. Lena could barely see the others through the mist. Jason was ahead, his form silhouetted against the dull, fading light. Amanda and Alex were close behind her, stumbling over the uneven terrain, their faces etched with terror. It was as though the world had been reduced to this moment, this chase, and everything else, all the knowledge they had carried with them, no longer mattered. Then, without warning, Jason screamed. It was a piercing, frantic sound that echoed in the fog and froze Lena's blood in her veins. She whipped around, her eyes searching the mist, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Jason!" Lena shouted, her voice rising in fear. The fog parted for a moment, and there, in the distance, she saw Jason struggling against the air. His arms flailed helplessly, and his body seemed to jerk unnaturally, as though something had a hold of him. His mouth opened wide, as if he was screaming, but the sound was muffled, swallowed by the thick fog and the growls that rumbled from deep within the earth. Lena's heart sank. The creature was too close. "Jason!" she cried again, her feet moving on instinct. But even as she ran toward him, the ground beneath her began to quake, as though the earth itself was trying to stop her. She stumbled, falling forward onto her hands, but quickly righted herself and pushed on. "Come on, we have to save him!" Amanda's voice broke through the chaos, panic tinging her words. Alex's face was pale, his eyes wide with horror, but he didn't speak. Lena's eyes locked on Jason as he disappeared from view again, swallowed by the thick fog. She couldn't hear his screams anymore. "Where did he go?" Amanda whispered, her voice almost a prayer. "What's happening? What's that thing?" Lena didn't have time to answer. She could feel it. The ground was trembling harder now, the rumbling intensifying. The fog, thick and treacherous, was closing in on them. And in the distance, Lena thought she saw movement. Not just the creature, but something else. Another presence in the fog. Something else was watching them. But before Lena could say anything, a rustling sound came from behind them. The others turned, their eyes wide, and Lena instinctively stepped in front of Amanda and Alex, her heart thudding in her chest. Out of the mist emerged another figure. It was a man, wild-eyed, dirty and dishevelled, but his eyes gleamed with urgency and fear. His clothes were torn, and his face was streaked with dirt and blood. He moved quickly, almost as if he knew exactly where he was going. "Who are you?" Amanda shouted, her voice sharp with fear. The man didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed Lena by the arm with a strength that made her flinch. "You're all in danger!" he barked, his voice low and rough. "The creature will kill you if you stay here. You have to move. Now!" Lena recoiled, pulling her arm free. "What do you mean? Who are you? Where did you come from?" She looked over her shoulder nervously, her mind racing. Was he a survivor? The man's eyes darted to the ground, then to the fog, as though something unseen was lurking just beyond their vision. "It's here," he said, his voice trembling. "It's closer than you think. You need to come with me if you want to survive." Lena felt her stomach twist. Survive? But before anyone could react, another roar split the air. A deafening guttural sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. The ground shook harder, and the air became thick with the oppressive weight of something ancient and terrifying. "Move!" the man ordered, grabbing Amanda's arm this time and pulling her forward. Lena hesitated for only a moment before following, her mind reeling. They had no choice but to trust this stranger, for there was nothing else left. They were too far into the unknown, and the creature was closing in. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to escape, but she had no idea where to go, no way of knowing what would happen next. The man led them through the dense fog, his footsteps sure and quick, as though he had navigated this cursed land for years. Lena tried to keep up, but the mist was disorienting, and the air felt impossibly thick. They were moving deeper into the ruins, and Lena's sense of direction had all but vanished. They had already run too far. "Who are you?" Alex asked, his voice edged with suspicion. "How do we know we can trust you?" The man didn't look back. "I'm someone who's been trying to stop it," he said grimly. "I didn't make it in time, but you might still have a chance." Lena's heart pounded. A chance? A chance at what? Before she could voice the question, the fog parted slightly, revealing an old, crumbling stone wall up ahead, the surface covered in strange markings that seemed to pulse with a faint, eerie light. The man stopped, turning to face them. His expression was tight with urgency. "Here!" "We'll hide here for now," he said. Lena opened her mouth to protest, but another tremor of the ground silenced her. The roar of the creature was now unmistakable, closer, angrier. The entire landscape felt alive with dread, the air thick with an unnatural energy. The man reached for something on the ground, a bundle of old, tattered cloth, and pulled it open to reveal a small, ornate dagger. It gleamed in the mist, its blade dark and strange. "What is that?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man turned to her, his face grim. "A key," he said, "to sealing it away. If we can find the right place, the right markings, we can stop it, but we need to get there before it catches us." Lena's mind raced. Seal it away? But the creature... What was it, really? Was it just some monster from the past or something more? But before she could ask more, the ground beneath them rumbled again, and then they heard it, a low, guttural growl, louder and closer than ever. The creature was no longer just a shadow in the fog, it was right behind them. The mist had grown thick enough to drown out all sound, except for the pounding of Lena's heart. She could feel the creature's presence in the air around her, a malevolent force that pressed down on them like the weight of 1,000 nightmares. The ground trembled beneath her feet with each passing moment, and she knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that they were running out of time. The strange man, still holding the dagger tightly in his hand, glanced at Lena with a look that spoke volumes: fear, determination, and the faintest hint of something deeper, a secret he hadn't shared. "We need to move. Now!" he urged, his voice strained. "If we don't reach the altar in time, it will destroy everything." Lena swallowed hard, her throat dry. The altar? What altar? The creature, that thing of legend, was closing in. Every second felt like an eternity. Amanda's voice cracked with fear as she turned to the man, her eyes wide with panic. You said we could stop it, but how? How do we stop it?" The man's eyes darted to the ground, his face momentarily shadowed by guilt. "There's no guarantee," he said, "but this is the only chance we've got. If we don't try, we'll be dead before dawn." A rumbling sound pierced the air and Lena's stomach dropped. It wasn't a growl anymore. It was a roar, the sound of something ancient and unstoppable. The creature was no longer hidden by the fog. It was here, towering over them, its massive form casting a long, terrifying shadow. Lena could hear its claws scraping against the stone. She could feel the heat of its breath in the air, hot and fetid, like the breath of something long forgotten, something that should have stayed asleep. "Get to the altar!" the man shouted, shoving them forward. "Now! Don't look back!" Without thinking, Lena bolted, her feet pounding against the uneven ground. Behind her, she heard the others running too, their breath coming in short, panicked gasps. But there was no time to wonder if they were all following, no time to worry if they'd make it in time. The creature was coming. It was so close now, its roar vibrating through her bones. Ahead, through the thick fog, Lena saw it. A towering stone structure, ancient and covered in strange symbols. The markings on the walls glowed faintly in the mist, and for a moment she thought she saw movement within the shadows of the stone. The man, his face twisted with concentration, darted ahead of her, leading them to the centre of the structure. The altar. Lena's feet seemed to move of their own accord, guided by sheer desperation, as if the very stone beneath her was pulling her forward. But every step was agony. Her breath caught in her throat, and the ground continued to tremble beneath them. "Here! The symbols on the stone!" the man cried, pointing frantically. "We need to carve the dagger into them. It's the only way to seal it away, before it's too late." Lena's pulse hammered in her ears. She grabbed the dagger from the man's hand, her fingers trembling as she held the blade. The weight of the moment felt unbearable. Amanda was crying, her body shaking with fear. "What if it doesn't work? What if we don't make it?" The man didn't answer, his face pale as he glanced toward the fog, where the creature's glowing eyes could be seen, tracking them with an unsettling intelligence. "It's too late to second-guess now," he said, his voice tight with urgency. Lena dropped to her knees at the altar, the dagger cold in her hand. The stone was covered with intricate symbols, lines that seemed to pulse as though they had a life of their own. Her mind raced as she realized what had to be done. The symbols were not just carvings, they were part of the spell, part of the barrier that had held the creature in place for centuries. With shaking hands, Lena raised the dagger. She pressed it against the first symbol. Nothing happened. She moved it to another symbol, her breath coming in short bursts. Sweat trickled down her face as the ground trembled harder beneath them. The roar of the creature was deafening now, its claws scraping the stone. "Come on." Lena's fingers were numb, her movements clumsy. She wasn't sure if she could do this, if any of them could. Then she saw it. A flicker of light, a shimmering glow around the symbol she was carving into. The earth seemed to hum in response, the energy in the air crackling with power. She could feel it now, the ancient force of the creature pushing back against the very fabric of the world. She gritted her teeth, her heart pounding louder than the roar of the creature. Just one more, she thought. But before she could make the final incision, a shadow loomed over her. A massive claw shot out from the fog, and before she could react, the creature's grotesque form was standing before them, its glowing eyes fixed on Lena. Its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth dripping with venom. Lena froze. She could feel its breath on her skin, could almost see the tendrils of darkness that swirled around it, suffocating the air. It was too late. They were done for. But then, as if responding to the creature's approach, the symbols on the stone altar flared to life, brighter than ever. Lena's heart raced, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't know what was happening, but the power was undeniable. She could feel it coursing through her, through all of them. "Lena, hurry!" the man shouted. "Finish it!" She didn't hesitate. She pressed the dagger into the final symbol, carving it deep into the stone. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The fog parted briefly, revealing the creature's massive form. But just as the light from the altar reached its peak, something happened, something Lena couldn't explain. The air around them crackled with energy, and the creature let out a screeching roar, one so loud it felt like it would shatter the very earth. But before Lena could even blink, the beast began to dissolve, its form flickering like a fading shadow. Its massive claws scraped against the stone, but its body seemed to collapse in on itself, fading into nothingness. Lena's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. The roar of the creature faded, replaced by a sudden, oppressive silence. For several long moments, there was nothing, only the soft rustle of the mist around them. Lena looked around, barely believing what she was seeing. The altar was glowing faintly, its power spent, the creature vanquished. She didn't know how long they sat there, the silence pressing in on them. But finally the man spoke, his voice soft. "It's over," he said, his voice carrying a strange finality. "You did it." Lena, her heart still racing, didn't know what to say. The world around her felt surreal, as though she had just woken from a nightmare. The man turned to her. "But this place," he said, looking around at the crumbling ruins, "it will remain. The creature may be gone, but the power, it still lingers." The silence was oppressive. For a moment, it felt as if the world had been suspended, frozen in time. The once terrifying presence of the creature had dissipated, leaving only a faint glow lingering over the altar. The air, heavy with the aftermath of the battle, seemed to pulse with an unnatural stillness. Lena stared at the place where the beast had stood only moments ago, half expecting it to reappear, but there was nothing. Nothing but the faint scent of something ancient and old, like the remnants of forgotten histories. "We did it," Lena whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Amanda, still crouched near the altar, slowly raised her head. Her eyes were wide, her breath ragged, but there was something else in her gaze. Relief. A deep, consuming relief that made the tension in her shoulders ease. "Is it really over?" Amanda's voice cracked, barely audible. Lena didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at the man, the stranger who had guided them through this nightmare. He was standing slightly apart from them, his face a mix of exhaustion and something else. Something Lena couldn't quite read. "We should leave," he said, his voice low, yet steady. He gave them a long, appraising glance before turning toward the exit of the ruins. "The creature's power is broken for now, but it's still dangerous here. The ruins are unstable, and there may be more traps. We should get out before—" His words were interrupted by the sound of a distant rumble. A tremor ran through the ground beneath their feet, and Lena's heart lurched. The island had always felt strange, ancient in a way that made her skin crawl. But now, with the creature gone, it felt unsettled, as though it was waking up. "The island is alive," Lena murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Yes," the man confirmed, glancing back at her. "It's old, too old, and it doesn't like being disturbed." Lena felt a chill run down her spine as the truth of his words sank in. The island was ancient, a place of power, and they had awoken something that had been dormant for centuries. The balance had shifted. What else might it stir? What other dangers had they released? Despite the questions swirling in her mind, Lena knew they couldn't stay here. Not for long. The creature's defeat had come at a cost, and the aftershocks were already making themselves felt. "We should go," the man repeated, his tone firmer now. "It's safer to leave the island and figure things out from there." Lena looked at Amanda, whose eyes had softened with the relief of survival, but there was a new understanding in them too. The ordeal had forged a bond between them, a bond of survival and shared horror. They had both faced the impossible and made it out. But neither of them had quite processed the full weight of their actions yet. "Are you coming?" Lena asked, turning back to the man. He hesitated, his gaze distant. "I can't leave," he said, his voice low but resolute. "There's something I have to finish here, something I've been trying to undo for years." Lena frowned, unsure whether to press him for more answers or to accept his decision. Something about the man's expression, however, held her back. He didn't seem to be asking for help, and in a way, she knew there was nothing more she could do for him. Amanda, ever the skeptic, narrowed her eyes. "You're just going to stay here after everything?" The man's lips curled into a small, rueful smile. "I have no choice. There's still work to be done." Lena wasn't sure if she should feel sympathy for him or distrust. Whatever his motives were, they were wrapped in a mystery that seemed to deepen with every word he spoke. But there was little time to dwell on it now. They had to leave. The three of them turned away from the altar and started down the narrow path leading out of the ruins. The fog had thickened again, swirling around them in slow, deliberate movements, almost as if it were drawing them into its depths. Lena's footsteps faltered as the ground shifted beneath her. The tremors were growing more frequent, stronger. The island was in motion. "We need to hurry," she said, urgency creeping into her voice. She could feel it now. The island was shifting, perhaps reacting to the energy they had unleashed. It felt as if it were closing in around them, as though it didn't want to let them leave. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. "What's happening? Why is it still shaking?" "I don't know," Lena admitted, her pulse quickening. "But it's not just the creature that's dangerous. This island, it has power. It's not over." They pushed on, their pace quickening as the tremors intensified. The fog, thick and oppressive, seemed to press in around them like a living thing. The man led them toward the edge of the island, where the tree line thinned and the shoreline appeared through the mist. "I think I see something," Lena said, her heart leaping in her chest. "Was it a boat? Were they about to escape?" "No," the man said quietly, shaking his head. "That's not what we need. There's no way off the island that's safe right now." Confusion flooded Lena's mind. "What do you mean? We've been on this island for days. We've found no way to leave. What else is there?" "There is one last thing," the man said. "But it's risky. We can't leave until I know it's done." Lena's gaze flicked between the man and the darkening horizon. Time was running out. The island was fighting them, but could they really trust this man to finish whatever he had started? And would it even make any difference in the long run? "Let's just go!" Amanda snapped, her voice tinged with frustration and fear. "We can't stay here. We need to leave now." The man's eyes softened as he met her gaze, but his decision remained firm. "This is the only way, trust me." Lena's heart wavered. Despite everything, despite the confusion and fear, she knew they couldn't leave just yet. They had come this far together, and she couldn't abandon him now. But she also couldn't shake the unease that still clung to the air around them. "Just hurry," she whispered, and together they moved toward the final, unknown path that might, or might not, lead them to safety. The mist had lifted, revealing the jagged coastline of the island. The fog, once a dense shroud that had felt like it was smothering them, was now nothing more than an eerie memory, drifting away into the distance. As Lena, Amanda, and the man, whose name still remained a mystery, made their way through the final stretch of land toward the secluded inlet, they were met with an unsettling calm. The earth beneath them had settled, but the air still carried an electric charge, as though the island was holding its breath. Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't out of danger yet. The tremors had subsided, but they had left a mark on her, both physically and mentally. Every step felt like the island was testing them, as if the ground itself didn't want them to leave. "Are we almost there?" Amanda asked, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She was walking closely behind Lena, her eyes scanning the horizon nervously, her steps hurried. "I think so," Lena replied, though she wasn't sure. The man had been leading them toward a secluded cove, away from the main shoreline. There was a boat, or at least that's what he had promised, though Lena still didn't understand how it could be the key to their escape. The island had no normal pathways, no real signs of human activity, except for their own desperate passage. The more she thought about it, the more she questioned whether they were truly safe yet. "Stay close," the man muttered, glancing back at them. "I don't want to risk anything now." As they neared the edge of the cove, Lena saw it, a small, weather-worn boat half hidden behind a cluster of rocks. It was nothing impressive, barely larger than a raft, its hull scarred and patched in places. It didn't look like much, but it was their ticket out. Lena stopped in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat. This is it." The man nodded, his expression unreadable. "It's the only way." Amanda stared at the boat, still unsure. "You're sure it's seaworthy?" she asked, eyeing the patches and the barnacles clinging to the sides. "We don't have a choice," the man said, his voice firm. "The island's power is not to be trifled with. It's already begun to shift, and we need to go before it gets worse." Lena felt her pulse quicken. The unease that had clung to her since the creature's defeat began to surge again. She stepped forward, pulling a deep breath into her lungs, and let her fingers graze the rough texture of the boat's side. It felt real, solid. Maybe, just maybe, this would be their way out. But even as she tried to steel herself, doubts kept swirling in her mind. Was leaving the island the right choice? Could they trust the man who had led them here? And if they did escape, what kind of life would they return to? The island had changed them all in ways they couldn't yet fully understand. "We don't have much time," the man said, breaking her thoughts. "Help me with the boat." Lena nodded, grateful for the urgency that helped ground her. Amanda, though, hesitated. "How far are we going?" she asked, looking back at the dark expanse of the island behind them. "I don't know," the man admitted, "but we'll find a way. It's better than staying here." With little choice but to trust him, Lena and Amanda moved toward the boat, helping to push it into the shallows. It felt like a moment of finality, the last step in a long and dangerous journey. The man grabbed an old, broken paddle and pushed the boat into the water. "Get in," he said, his voice low, eyes scanning the water. "We have to move now." Without another word, Lena climbed into the boat, Amanda following closely behind. The man took the last seat, grabbing the paddle and digging it into the water with a powerful stroke. The boat lurched forward, barely steady against the current, but it held. They rowed in silence for a while, the only sound the rhythmic splash of the paddle against the water and the occasional rustle of the wind. The island, now far behind them, seemed to watch them with a silent menace, the shapes of the rooms almost lost in the distance. Lena couldn't help but glance back, her thoughts clouded with questions. Was it really over? Had they truly escaped the island's influence, or was it only a matter of time before the horrors followed them? The man rowed steadily, his face tight with concentration. "We're almost there," he said, his voice gruff. "The nearest safe place is just ahead." Lena felt a small flicker of hope at his words, but it was tempered by the nagging feeling that something was still wrong. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the air around them still felt charged, as if the island's spirit was reaching out, trying to drag them back. After what seemed like hours, the boat finally reached the shore of a quiet, untouched beach. The sand was white and unspoiled, and the sea lapped gently at the edge. Lena felt a strange sense of relief. She wanted to leap out of the boat and kiss the solid ground, but something in her chest still held her back. They had survived, yes, but what had they really overcome? The man helped them disembark, his movements slow and deliberate. As Lena stood on the shore, the weight of the journey seemed to hit her all at once. They had made it. Against all odds, they had made it out. Amanda looked over at her, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "We did it," she said quietly, her voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. "We actually did it." Lena nodded, but it was hard to share in Amanda's joy completely. The island, its mysteries and its dangers still haunted her thoughts. What had they awakened, really? Was this their end, or had they simply exchanged one nightmare for another? "I think we're free," the man said, sounding almost relieved, though his expression was unreadable. "For now, at least. But remember, this place isn't just a memory. It's part of something much bigger." Lena looked at him, her thoughts racing. He had guided them through this nightmare, but he was still so much of a mystery. He had his own unfinished business with the island, something that hadn't been resolved. She couldn't help but wonder what that meant for their future. They had survived, yes, but there was something deeper that had shifted within them all. The lessons of survival and courage had been written in every step of their journey. Lena had learned the value of trusting others, even in the face of fear, and the strength of the bonds they had formed. In the end, they had all overcome the darkness together. "Let's go," Lena said, her voice steady now. "We can figure out the rest when we're safe." The man gave a nod, his gaze flicking between the two of them. He didn't seem to have any answers, but for now, the quiet beach was enough. As they walked into the unfamiliar world beyond the island, Lena allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The island was behind them. Whatever came next, they had faced the impossible together. And they were free,